Pre-Socratic Philosophers. Julien Hyun. Copyright 2024. Author name. All rights reserved. Table of contents. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Chapter 6. Parmenides. Parmenides, 515–450 BCE of Elea, an ancient Greek city in southern Italy, was a pre-Socratic philosopher who made one of the most radical and significant contributions to early Western philosophy. He is often regarded as the founder of metaphysics and ontology, the study of being, and his ideas mark a sharp departure from the views of his predecessors. In contrast to philosophers like Heraclitus, who emphasized the constant flux and change in the universe, Parmenides argued that change is an illusion and that reality is unchanging and eternal. His philosophy laid the foundation for later thinkers, particularly Plato and Aristotle, and has been influential in shaping the Western metaphysical tradition. Life and background. Parmenides was born around 515 BCE in Elea, modern-day Velia in southern Italy, a Greek colony. He is best known as the founder of the Eleatic school of philosophy, which also included philosophers like Zeno of Elea, famous for his paradoxes, and Melissus of Samos. Little is known about Parmenides' early life, but it is clear that he was well-educated and belonged to a prominent aristocratic family. According to Diogenes Laertius, Parmenides was a lawgiver in his city and was highly respected for his wisdom and political leadership. His influence extended beyond philosophy, and he was regarded as a major intellectual figure of his time. Philosophical thought. Parmenides' philosophy represents a radical departure from the early Greek thinkers, who sought to explain the universe in terms of a fundamental substance or arch, such as water for Thales or air for Anaximenes. Instead of focusing on what the universe is made of, Parmenides turned his attention to the question of being itself, what it means for something to exist. His central work is a poem titled On Nature Periphysios, which is one of the earliest known systematic philosophical texts. In this poem, Parmenides presents his ideas in two parts, the way of truth and the way of opinion. The poem is largely preserved through later fragments and commentaries by other philosophers, such as Plato, Aristotle, and Sextus Empiricus. The way of truth, aletheia. In The Way of Truth, Parmenides argues that reality is one, unchanging, and eternal. He believes that all notions of change, multiplicity, and movement are illusions, and that the only true reality is being. This view is often summarized as monism, the idea that all of reality is unified in a single, indivisible whole. Parmenides asserts that true being is unchanging because, if something were to change, it would have to come from non-being or go into non-being, and this is impossible. Non-being, for Parmenides, cannot exist because it is literally nothing. Therefore, nothing comes from nothing, and nothing that exists can cease to exist. Thus, reality must be eternal and unchanging. It is, and it cannot not be. Fragment DK 28-2. Parmenides argues that there can be only one reality, and this reality is continuous, indivisible, and whole. There cannot be multiple beings because if there were, they would have to be distinguished by something such as space or time, and this would imply the existence of non-being between them. Since non-being does not exist, reality must be one, undivided whole, for there is no second reality apart from the one. Fragment DK 28-8. Since change is an illusion and non-being is impossible, Parmenides concludes that time itself is an illusion. Reality is eternal, with no beginning or end. Past, present, and future are human constructs that have no place in the eternal nature of true being. Parmenides criticizes human reliance on the senses to understand the world. He argues that the senses present a world of change and multiplicity, which is deceptive. True knowledge, according to Parmenides, can only be achieved through reason and logical thinking, what he calls the way of truth. Our senses may tell us that things come into existence and pass away, but reason reveals that reality is permanent and unchanging. Do not let habit, born from experience, force you along this path, directing an aimless eye or an echoing ear or tongue. Fragment DK 28:7. In essence, Parmenide's way of truth is a rationalist critique of the naturalistic philosophies of his predecessors, which sought to explain the world through the senses and material substances. Parmenides argues that the ultimate reality cannot be grasped by the senses, but only by thought. The way of opinion doxes. In contrast to the way of truth, Parmenide presents the way of opinion as a description of the world as it appears to human beings. This is the realm of illusion, where people believe in multiplicity, change, birth, and death. Parmenide presents this view not as the truth, but as a deceptive opinion based on sense perception. In the way of opinion, Parmenides describes how the cosmos seems to operate, according to a dualistic system of light and darkness. This section of the poem aligns more with traditional cosmological theories, but Parmenides dismisses it as unreliable. He includes it to show that while people may think they understand the world through their senses, they are in fact caught in a web of false beliefs. This dualistic cosmology reflects the common Greek worldview of opposites such as hot and cold, light and dark, or wet and dry. But Parmenides insists that such views are merely part of the illusory world of doxa opinion, and are inconsistent with the eternal unity of true being. Parmenides' influence on later philosophers. Parmenides' ideas had a profound and lasting influence on later philosophers, particularly Plato and Aristotle, as well as Neoplatonists and modern metaphysicians. His emphasis on being and his rejection of change and multiplicity inspired significant philosophical debates and shaped the development of Western thought. Plato was heavily influenced by Parmenides' metaphysics, particularly in his development of the theory of forms. Plato's view that the world of appearances is constantly changing and deceptive echoes Parmenides' rejection of the senses as a reliable source of knowledge. For Plato, the forms represent the unchanging reality behind the world of change, much like Parmenides' eternal being. Plato's dialogue, Parmenides, explores the philosophical challenges posed by Parmenides' arguments, and is considered one of his most difficult and profound works. Aristotle also engaged with Parmenides' philosophy, though he ultimately rejected many of Parmenides' conclusions. Aristotle agreed that being is fundamental to metaphysics, but argued that change and motion are real aspects of the natural world. Aristotle's metaphysical framework, which involves potentiality and actuality, was developed in part as a response to Parmenides' claim that change is illusory. Parmenides' pupil, Zeno of Elea, is famous for his paradoxes, which were designed to defend Parmenides' idea that motion and change are impossible. Zeno's paradoxes, such as the Achilles and the tortoise or the dichotomy paradox, aim to show that the very idea of motion leads to logical contradictions, reinforcing Parmenides' argument that change is illusory. Works and fragments. Parmenides' primary philosophical contribution is contained in his poem on nature, though the full text of the poem has been lost. Fragments have been preserved in the works of later philosophers, particularly Plato, Aristotle, and Sextus Empiricus. These fragments give us a glimpse of the two paths of inquiry, truth, and opinion that form the core of Parmenides' philosophy. Legacy and modern interpretations. Parmenides' philosophy is considered a turning point in the history of Western thought. His emphasis on the logical necessity of being and his rejection of sense perception as a source of knowledge paved the way for the development of rationalist traditions in philosophy. His focus on the one, unchanging reality also influenced Neoplatonism and continues to be a subject of study in contemporary metaphysics and ontology. Modern philosophers such as Hegel, Heidegger, and Whitehead have engaged deeply with Parmenides' ideas. Heidegger, in particular, regarded Parmenides as the key to understanding the problem of being, and his exploration of being and time was partly inspired by Parmenides' metaphysical insights. Conclusion. Parmenides of Elea represents one of the most important figures in ancient Greek philosophy. His radical claim that reality is unchanging and that all change and multiplicity are mere illusions set him apart from earlier thinkers and had a profound impact on the development of metaphysics. By emphasizing the necessity of reason over sense perception, Parmenides laid the groundwork for later philosophical traditions and remains a pivotal figure in discussions of being and ontology. Chapter 7 Empedocles. Empedocles 490–430 BCE was a Pre-Socratic philosopher, scientist, and poet from Anaxagoras, modern-day Agrigento in Sicily. He is best known for his theory that all matter is composed of four fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and for introducing the concept of the forces of love and strife, which act upon these elements to create and destroy the world. Empedocles' thought represents a unique blend of mysticism and rational science, and he is often seen as a transitional figure between earlier mythological explanations and the emerging scientific rationalism of his time. Empedocles was also a poet, and his ideas are preserved in fragments of his two major works on nature and purifications. His influence can be seen in both natural philosophy and medicine, and he made significant contributions to theories about the origin of life, cosmology, and metaphysics. Life and background. Empedocles was born around 490 BCE in Anaxagoras, one of the wealthiest and most powerful Greek cities in Sicily. He came from a noble and wealthy family, and some accounts suggest that he was active in politics, serving as both a statesman and a reformer in his city. His life, however, is surrounded by many myths and legends, including claims that he had magical powers and could perform miraculous feats, such as controlling the winds or bringing the dead back to life. Empedocles was a charismatic figure, and many of his followers viewed him not only as a philosopher, but also as a divine figure. According to tradition, he died under mysterious circumstances, possibly by throwing himself into the crater of Mount Etna, a story that symbolizes his association with fire and his own sense of divinity. Philosophical thought. Empedocles' philosophy is a synthesis of materialism and mysticism. He is best known for his cosmological theories, particularly his four-element theory and the concept of the forces of love and strife. His ideas on the nature of reality also include an early version of evolutionary thought and a cyclical view of the universe. The four elements. Empedocles introduced the idea that the entire cosmos is made up of four basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water, which he called roots. He believed that these elements were eternal and indestructible, and that everything in the world was composed of different combinations of these four elements. Here first the four roots of all things: bright Zeus fire, life-bringing Hera air, Adonis earth, and Nestus water, whose tears are the source of mortal streams. Fragment DK 31:6. The four elements, according to Empedocles, cannot be created or destroyed. They can only be combined and separated. All physical substances are simply different mixtures of these four elements in varying proportions. This theory represented an attempt to reconcile the apparent diversity of the world with a belief in the permanence of matter, by suggesting that everything is made from the same basic components. Empedocles was able to account for both change and continuity in the natural world. The forces of love and strife. In addition to the four elements, Empedocles proposed that two opposing forces, love and strife, govern the interactions between the elements and drive all cosmic processes. These forces were both metaphysical and natural, representing opposing principles of unity and division. The force of love unites the elements, bringing them together into harmonious mixtures. It is responsible for creation, growth, and the formation of life. In the cosmic cycle, love is the creative force that fosters harmony and unity in the world. Love draws all things together into one. Fragment DK 31:17. The force of strife causes the elements to separate and break apart. It is responsible for destruction, conflict, and the disintegration of compounds. In the cosmic cycle, strife is the destructive force that leads to chaos and division. Strife scatters them far apart. Fragment DK31 Bait. Empedocles believed that the universe operates in a cosmic cycle, driven by the interplay between love and strife. At certain times, love dominates, bringing about creation and harmony, as the elements come together to form the world. At other times, strife takes over, tearing the elements apart and returning the cosmos to a state of chaos. This cyclical view of the universe, with periods of creation and destruction, was a significant contribution to early cosmology, evolutionary thought, and the origin of life. Empedocles also proposed one of the earliest theories of evolution and the origin of life. He believed that life emerged through a process of trial and error, as different combinations of body parts came together. Initially, these body parts such as heads, arms, and legs existed separately and randomly, but eventually, through the action of love, they came together in different combinations to form living organisms. Some combinations, according to Empedocles, were successful and survived, while others were not viable and perished. This idea anticipates later evolutionary theories by suggesting that organisms evolve through a process of natural selection, based on their ability to survive and reproduce. Many creatures with faces and breasts facing in different directions were born, some offspring of oxen with human faces, others again of humans with the heads of cattle. Fragment DK3161. Although Empedocles' theory was couched in mythological terms, it represents an early attempt to explain the diversity of life through natural processes rather than divine intervention. His ideas about the origin of life influenced later biological thought, particularly in the Hellenistic period. Cosmology. Empedocles' cosmology reflects his belief in the cyclical nature of the universe. He envisioned the cosmos as alternating between periods dominated by love and periods dominated by strife. When love dominates, the elements are drawn together, and the universe becomes a unified, harmonious whole. During this phase, life flourishes, and the cosmos is in a state of balance and order. When strife takes over, the elements are driven apart, and the world dissolves into chaos. Destruction and conflict reign during this period, and life is destroyed. This cosmic cycle repeats itself endlessly, with love and strife taking turns as the dominant forces in the universe. Empedocles believed that we currently live in a mixed phase, where both love and strife are at work in the world, causing both creation and destruction to occur simultaneously. Mysticism and purification. In addition to his scientific and cosmological ideas, Empedocles was deeply influenced by Orphic mysticism and Pythagoreanism, which emphasized the immortality of the soul and the need for spiritual purification. He believed in the doctrine of metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls, a concept similar to reincarnation. According to Empedocles, souls are trapped in a cycle of birth and death due to their involvement in wrongdoing, but through purification they can eventually achieve release from this cycle. Empedocles viewed human existence as part of a larger cosmic struggle between love and strife. The soul, he argued, was divine, but had become entangled in the world of matter. Through a process of purification, individuals could free their souls from the cycle of reincarnation and return to the divine realm. Purification and ethical conduct. Empedocles outlined a series of rituals and ethical guidelines aimed at purifying the soul. He believed that eating meat was a form of violence against animals, whose souls, like humans, were caught in the cycle of reincarnation. By avoiding meat, humans could purify their souls and avoid further contamination by strife. Empedocles advocated for ritual purification practices designed to cleanse the soul and restore it to its original divine state. Ethical behavior was essential for freeing the soul from the cycle of birth and death. He taught that humans should strive to live in harmony with the cosmic forces of love avoiding actions that would contribute to strife. In his poem Purifications, Empedocles presents himself as a divine figure who has achieved spiritual enlightenment and has come to guide others toward purification and liberation from the cycle of reincarnation. A god, no longer mortal, I go among you honored by all. Fragment DK 31 Bone 112. Works and fragments. Empedocles' philosophy is preserved in two main works, both of which survive only in fragments. On Nature is primarily concerned with cosmology and natural philosophy, outlining his theories about the four elements, love and strife, and the structure of the universe. Purifications is more focused on mysticism and religion, offering guidance on how to purify the soul and achieve liberation from the cycle of reincarnation. Many of Empedocles' ideas have been transmitted through later philosophers, such as Aristotle, Plato, and Sextus Empiricus, who quoted and discussed his works in their own writings. Influence and legacy. Empedocles' ideas had a significant impact on both philosophy and science. His theory of the four elements became the dominant cosmological model in the ancient world and continued to influence scientific thought well into the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. This four-element theory was later adopted by Plato and Aristotle, who refined and expanded upon it. Plato incorporated the four elements into his own cosmology, though he added a fifth element either to represent the heavens. Aristotle developed Empedocles' ideas into a more detailed physical theory of the elements, which he used to explain the properties of matter and the natural world. Stoic philosophers were influenced by Empedocles' ideas about cosmic cycles and the interaction of elemental forces, particularly the idea of cosmic cycles driven by creative and destructive forces. Empedocles' belief in the indestructibility of the four elements was a precursor to modern ideas about the conservation of matter, and his evolutionary theories anticipated later naturalistic explanations for the diversity of life. His understanding of the physical world, though influenced by mysticism, represents an important step in the development of natural philosophy. Conclusion. Empedocles of Anaxagoras was a brilliant thinker, whose ideas straddled the line between science and mysticism. His theory of the four elements and the cosmic forces of love and strife was one of the most comprehensive attempts in ancient Greece to explain the workings of the natural world. Additionally, his views on the transmigration of souls and the purification of the soul reflect the influence of Orphic and Pythagorean traditions. Empedocles' legacy endures through his influence on later philosophers, scientists, and mystics. Chapter 8 Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras 500–428 BCE was a Pre-Socratic philosopher from Clazomne, an ancient Greek city on the western coast of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. He is most famous for introducing the concept of nous mind as the cosmic principle that organizes the universe. His natural philosophy includes important contributions to cosmology, astronomy, and the theory of matter, particularly his idea that the cosmos consists of infinitely divisible particles or seeds. Anaxagoras was one of the first philosophers to live in Athens, where he profoundly influenced the intellectual culture of the city, particularly through his connection to Pericles, the influential Athenian statesman. Anaxagoras is also notable for his rational, scientific approach to understanding natural phenomena, rejecting traditional mythological explanations and setting the stage for the scientific method. His ideas had a lasting impact on later philosophers, such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Life and background. Anaxagoras was born around 500 BCE in Clazomne, an Ionian Greek city. He moved to Athens in his 30s, around 480 BCE, where he became part of the city's vibrant intellectual life. He is known to have been a close friend and advisor to Pericles, the influential Athenian statesman during the height of Athenian democracy. While in Athens, Anaxagoras was prosecuted for impiety due to his naturalistic explanations of celestial phenomena. He was particularly controversial for claiming that the sun was a fiery mass larger than the Peloponnese, and that the moon reflected the light of the sun, both of which contradicted the traditional belief that celestial bodies were divine. These ideas, perceived as irreverent toward the gods, led to his trial. Although Pericles intervened on his behalf, Anaxagoras was forced into exile, spending his final years in Lampsacus, where he continued his philosophical work until his death around 428 BCE. Philosophical thought. Anaxagoras' philosophy represents an important development in natural philosophy and cosmology, with two key ideas that stand out: the concept of nous mind and the theory of matter. Nous mind as the cosmic principle. Anaxagoras introduced nous, Greek for mind or intellect, as the organizing principle of the universe. He proposed that the cosmos, initially in a chaotic state where all things were mixed together, was set into motion and organized by nous, an intelligent and purposeful force. According to Anaxagoras, nous is the first cause that initiated the motion and separation of all things. This cosmic intelligence is distinct from matter, governing the order of the universe. Without being affected by it, all things were together. Then came nous and set them in order. Fragment DK 5912. Anaxagoras' nous is infinite, eternal, and self-ruling. It contains all knowledge and is responsible for creating order out of chaos. This was one of the earliest formulations of a teleological, principleth idea that there is an intelligent design or purpose behind the workings of the universe. This concept of nous laid the groundwork for later metaphysical and theological ideas, influencing philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle. Theory of matter, infinite divisibility and seeds. Anaxagoras' theory of matter is based on the idea of infinite divisibility and universal mixture. He proposed that everything in the cosmos is composed of tiny, imperceptible particles called seeds, spermata, which contain a portion of every kind of substance. Everything contains everything. Anaxagoras argued that there is no true creation or destruction in the universe. Rather, things change form by combining or separating pre-existing particles. Every object contains a portion of every type of matter, though different things appear as distinct substances because certain particles dominate the mixture. In everything, there is a portion of everything. Fragment DK 5911. For example, bread contains particles of bone, flesh, water, and more. However, since the bread particles dominate, the object appears as bread to us. This idea was a significant departure from earlier thinkers, like Empedocles, who claimed the cosmos consisted of four distinct elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Anaxagoras' theory of universal mixture sought to explain how diverse materials arise from an underlying continuity. Anaxagoras believed that matter is infinitely divisible, meaning there is no smallest particle or indivisible atom. No matter how small something is, it can always be divided into smaller parts. This contrasts with the later atomic theory of Leucippus and Democritus, who argued that the universe consists of indivisible atoms. Cosmology and astronomy. Anaxagoras was one of the first Greek philosophers to offer rational, scientific explanations for celestial phenomena, challenging the traditional mythological view that the sun, moon, and stars were gods or divine entities. Anaxagoras famously claimed that the sun was not a god, but a fiery mass larger than the Peloponnese. He also argued that the moon was made of earth-like material and did not produce its own light, but reflected the light of the sun. Anaxagoras provided one of the earliest correct explanations for eclipses, understanding that solar eclipses occur when the moon passes between the earth and the sun, and lunar eclipses occur when the earth's shadow falls on the moon. His naturalistic explanations of these phenomena were a major break from religious interpretations, which viewed celestial events as divine omens. Works and fragments. Anaxagoras wrote a treatise titled On Nature Periphysios, which elaborated on his cosmological and metaphysical ideas. However, like most works of Pre-Socratic philosophers, His writings survive only in fragments. These fragments were preserved by later thinkers such as Aristotle, Plato, and Simplicius, who discussed Anaxagoras' theories in their own works. The fragments that remain cover his theories on nous matter and his astronomical ideas. His thoughts on celestial phenomena, especially the nature of the sun and the moon, were radical for his time and contributed to his trial and eventual exile from Athens. Influence and legacy. Anaxagoras had a profound influence on both philosophy and science, and his ideas about nous and matter shaped the intellectual landscape of classical Greece. His naturalistic approach to understanding the cosmos laid the foundation for scientific inquiry, and his introduction of nous as an organizing principle influenced later metaphysical thought. Plato was influenced by Anaxagoras' idea of nous as the guiding principle of the universe. In Phaedo, Plato praised Anaxagoras for recognizing the importance of mind in organizing the cosmos, although he criticized him for not fully developing the implications of this insight. Plato's own theory of forms echoes Anaxagoras' distinction between the intelligible and material worlds. Aristotle discussed Anaxagoras' ideas in his Metaphysics and Physics, noting the importance of nous as a force in the cosmos. However, Aristotle criticized Anaxagoras for not giving a sufficient account of how nous operates. Aristotle also disagreed with Anaxagoras' theory of infinite divisibility, favoring a finite view of matter. Anaxagoras' rational, scientific explanations of natural phenomena, especially his theories on eclipses and the composition of celestial bodies, marked a significant step forward in the development of natural philosophy and astronomy. His approach set the stage for future scientific methods, where observation and reason were valued over mythological explanations. Anaxagoras' arrival in Athens played a crucial role in introducing Ionian natural philosophy to the city, which was then emerging as the intellectual center of Greece. His ideas influenced Socrates, who was familiar with his theories, and Pericles, who was an admirer of his work. Anaxagoras' emphasis on nous helped pave the way for Socratic and Platonic explorations of the role of reason and intellect in understanding the universe. Conclusion. Anaxagoras of Clazomenae was a pioneering philosopher whose ideas about nous mind and the infinite divisibility of matter marked a significant advance in the development of Greek natural philosophy. His rational explanations of the cosmos, particularly his views on celestial phenomena, challenged traditional religious interpretations and laid the groundwork for scientific inquiry. Although his ideas were controversial and led to his exile, Anaxagoras' contributions to philosophy and science had a lasting impact on later thinkers, especially Plato, Aristotle, and the Stoics. Chapter 9. Leucippus. Leucippus, the 5th century BCE, is considered the founder of atomism, a major pre-Socratic philosophical school that proposed that the universe is composed of small, indivisible particles called atoms. While little is known about Leucippus' life, and much of his work has been lost, he is credited with laying the groundwork for atomic theory, which was later expanded and developed by his more famous student, Democritus. Leucippus' ideas represented a radical departure from earlier metaphysical explanations of the universe, such as those offered by Parmenides and Anaxagoras. By proposing that reality could be explained through the interaction of material particles and void, rather than through the intervention of divine forces or an intelligent principle like nous. Life and background. Little is definitively known about Leucippus, and his historical existence was even doubted by some ancient writers like Epicurus. However, most ancient sources, including Aristotle and Diogenes Laertius, acknowledge Leucippus as the founder of atomism. He is believed to have been born in Miletus or Abdera in Thrace, though both cities are sometimes mentioned in connection with his life. Leucippus is thought to have been active around the 5th century BCE, making him a contemporary of other major pre-Socratic philosophers, like Anaxagoras, Empedocles, and Zeno of Elea. He is most famous for founding the school of atomism, which was later developed into a comprehensive theory by Democritus. Philosophical thought. Leucippus' primary contribution to philosophy is his theory of atomism, which he used to explain the structure of the universe. His philosophy centered on the idea that the universe consists of two fundamental realities, atoms and void empty space. He believed that these two elements could explain all natural phenomena, without the need for mystical or divine explanations. The theory of atoms. Leucippus proposed that everything in the universe is made up of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms, atomos, meaning uncuttable or indivisible. Atoms are the smallest possible units of matter, and cannot be broken down into smaller parts. The number of atoms is infinite, and they exist in infinite varieties of shapes and sizes. Atoms are in perpetual motion, colliding and combining to form the objects and phenomena we observe in the world. They are eternal and form the basis of all physical reality. The universe, according to Leucippus, consists entirely of atoms moving in the void. Everything that exists, from the stars to living beings, is composed of different combinations of these atoms. This theory represented a materialistic explanation of the cosmos and rejected the need for divine intervention or teleological principles to explain the natural world. Nothing happens at random, but everything happens out of reason and necessity. Fragment attributed to Leucippus by Aristotle. Void and motion. Leucippus' second key concept was the existence of void, or empty space. He argued that without void, motion would be impossible. Atoms move through the void, combining and separating to create the objects and phenomena that we observe in the world. This idea directly challenged the views of philosophers like Parmenides, who had denied the existence of empty space and argued that being is a single, unchanging whole. Leucippus maintained that void is just as essential to the structure of the universe as atoms themselves. The void allows atoms to move, interact, and form complex structures. This concept of empty space was groundbreaking, because it introduced the notion that space and matter are distinct, but equally fundamental aspects of the universe. Cosmology and natural philosophy. Leucippus' atomic theory also provided a cosmological framework for understanding the origin and nature of the universe. He believed that the cosmos emerged from the movement of atoms in the void, and that everything in the universe could be explained by the random but necessary interactions of atoms. Leucippus suggested that as atoms move through the void, they collide and form clusters, which eventually give rise to the various objects and entities in the universe. Some of these clusters become stars, planets, and other celestial bodies. Leucippus offered a mechanistic view of the universe, meaning that everything happens according to physical laws and necessity. He rejected the idea that natural events are governed by gods or by any purpose-driven force. Instead, he believed that natural phenomena could be explained by the motion and interaction of atoms. Works and fragments. Unfortunately, none of Leucippus' original works have survived. What is known about his ideas comes from later sources, primarily through the writings of Aristotle, Theophrastus, and Simplicius. His main work is believed to have been a treatise titled The Great World System, Megas Dikosmos, but this text is lost. Leucippus' ideas are also closely associated with those of his student, Democritus, who expanded and elaborated on the theory of atomism. In fact, many of Leucippus' ideas are often attributed to Democritus, as they are difficult to separate from the later developments of atomic theory. Influence and legacy. Leucippus' philosophy laid the foundation for atomism, which was one of the most influential materialistic theories of antiquity. His views on atoms and the void became central to the thought of Democritus, who developed a more comprehensive and systematic version of atomism. Together, their ideas formed the core of ancient atomic theory. Democritus, who is often seen as Leucippus' student, played a crucial role in refining and popularizing the theory of atomism. He expanded on Leucippus' ideas, describing the properties of atoms in more detail. and applying atomic theory to explain a wide range of natural phenomena, from the behavior of matter to human perception. Democritus is often given more credit for atomism because of the extensive development he provided to the theory, but it is widely accepted that the original framework of the theory came from Leucippus. Influence on later philosophers. Leucippus' atomism influenced later Hellenistic schools of thought, particularly the Epicureans. Epicurus and his followers adopted and adapted atomism as part of their materialistic and atheistic philosophy, emphasizing that all phenomena, including human consciousness, could be explained by the motion of atoms. Atomism also provided a key intellectual counterpoint to Plato and Aristotle, both of whom rejected atomism in favor of teleological explanations of the cosmos. However, despite their opposition, the atomist approach persisted in Greek philosophy and later influenced scientific thought in the modern era. Influence on modern science. Leucippus and Democritus' ideas about the indivisibility of matter and the existence of atoms prefigured the development of modern atomic theory in physics and chemistry. Although the ancient conception of atoms differs from the modern understanding, the basic idea that matter is composed of discrete, small units is fundamental to modern science. In the 17th and 18th centuries, philosophers and scientists such as Pierre Gassendi, Isaac Newton, and John Dalton revived atomism as part of the scientific revolution. Their work laid the groundwork for the atomic theories that would later be confirmed in the 19th and 20th centuries with the discovery of subatomic particles. Conclusion. Leucippus, though a somewhat shadowy figure in the history of philosophy, is regarded as the founder of atomism, one of the most important materialistic theories in Western thought. His groundbreaking ideas about the existence of atoms and void provided a mechanistic and naturalistic explanation for the structure of the universe that influenced later philosophers like Democritus, Epicurus, and even modern scientists. Leucippus' legacy is best understood through the development of atomic theory and the lasting impact of atomism on both ancient and modern philosophy. His contributions represent a significant step in the development of natural philosophy and the move away from mythological and teleological explanations of the universe. Chapter 10. Democritus. Democritus, 460 to 370 BCE, of Abdera, a pre-Socratic philosopher, is best known as the co-founder of atomic theory. Along with his teacher Leucippus, he developed one of the earliest materialist and mechanistic views of the universe, proposing that all matter is composed of small, indivisible particles called atoms moving through a void empty space. Often called the laughing philosopher due to his reputed cheerfulness, and his ethical teachings focused on happiness, Democritus' thought spanned physics, metaphysics, ethics, epistemology, and cosmology. Though many of his original works are lost, Democritus' philosophy has been preserved through later writers, such as Aristotle, Epicurus, and Diogenes Laertius, and it had a lasting impact on the development of science, particularly in the revival of atomism during the scientific revolution. Life and background. Democritus was born around 460 BCE in Abdera, a Greek city in Thrace, modern-day northern Greece. He was born into a wealthy family, which allowed him to travel widely and study under several prominent philosophers of the time, including Leucippus. His travels reportedly took him to Egypt, Babylon, and possibly India, where he gathered knowledge of natural philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. Unlike many of his philosophical contemporaries, Democritus was not directly involved in politics or the public life of Athens. He preferred a quiet, contemplative life, dedicated to philosophy and scientific inquiry. His reputation for cheerfulness and a good-humored disposition earned him the nickname, the laughing philosopher, as he emphasized the importance of happiness and contentment through moderation and understanding. Democritus is believed to have written extensively on a wide range of topics. Though most of his works have been lost, what we know of his philosophy comes primarily from references made by Aristotle, Epicurus and later Roman and medieval scholars. Philosophical thought and atomic theory. Democritus is most famous for his atomistic theory of the universe. But his philosophy also encompassed ethics, epistemology, cosmology, and theology. He believed that everything in the universe could be explained through natural laws and mechanistic principles, without the need for divine intervention or teleology. Democritus developed the atomic theory that was originally introduced by his teacher, Leucippus. According to Democritus, all matter consists of small, indivisible units called atoms, atomos, meaning uncuttable, which exist in a void, empty space. Democritus argued that atoms are the fundamental building blocks of all matter. They are indivisible, meaning they cannot be broken down into smaller parts, and they are eternal, meaning they cannot be created or destroyed. Atoms are also solid and imperceptible to the human senses. Although atoms themselves are indivisible, they differ in shape, size, weight, and arrangement. These differences in atomic properties account for the diversity of substances in the natural world. For instance, atoms of water are smooth and round, while atoms of earth are rough and jagged. The combinations of atoms in different arrangements produce all physical objects. Atoms are in constant motion through the void. Democritus proposed that all changes in the natural world, including the formation of objects, are the result of atoms colliding, combining, or separating from one another. These interactions happen according to the natural laws of necessity, and without any purpose or design. Democritus believed that atoms move through a void, which he described as empty space. This void is essential because it allows atoms to move and interact. Without void, there would be no space for atoms to move or rearrange themselves, making change impossible. By convention, sweet is sweet, bitter is bitter, hot is hot, cold is cold. But in reality there are only atoms and void. This materialist explanation of the universe was a significant departure from previous philosophical traditions that relied on divine or teleological principles to explain the nature of reality. Democritus' mechanistic worldview laid the foundation for later scientific inquiry, particularly in physics and chemistry. Cosmology. In his cosmology, Democritus proposed that the universe is infinite and contains an infinite number of atoms and worlds. He suggested that some worlds are similar to our own, while others are radically different. This idea of a plurality of worlds was revolutionary and prefigured later ideas in astronomy about the possibility of multiple galaxies and planets. According to Democritus, worlds are formed when atoms collide in the void, gather together, and create larger structures. Some of these structures form stars, planets, and other celestial bodies. As atoms continue to move and interact, these worlds may eventually decay and disintegrate, only for new worlds to be formed again through atomic collisions. Epistemology, the theory of knowledge. Democritus believed that human perception and knowledge are based on the interaction of atoms with the soul, which he thought was also composed of fine, smooth atoms. However, he was a skeptic when it came to the reliability of human senses. He argued that our senses provide only a subjective experience of the world, as they are influenced by the arrangements and motions of atoms. In a particular context, for Democritus, the things we perceive through our senses, such as color, taste, or smell, are not objective qualities of objects themselves, but rather the result of atomic interactions with our sensory organs. Thus, what we experience as hot or cold, sweet or bitter, are just the effects of atomic structures on our sensory apparatus. Democritus distinguished between true knowledge, which comes from rational thought and is concerned with atoms, and the void and conventional knowledge, which comes from sensory perception and deals with subjective experiences, like color, taste, and sound. He believed that while our senses can deceive us, reason allows us to grasp the true nature of reality, which is nothing more than atoms in the void. Ethics and the pursuit of happiness. In addition to his natural philosophy, Democritus developed an ethical theory focused on achieving eudaimonia, happiness, or flourishing. He believed that happiness comes not from external wealth or pleasure, but from inner tranquility and self-control. Democritus' ethics emphasized the cultivation of moderation, reason, and contentment as the key to living a good life. Democritus taught that true happiness is found in contentment with what one has, and in avoiding excess or extremes of emotion. He believed that moderation in all things leads to a balanced and fulfilling life. Like other philosophers of his time, Democritus emphasized the role of reason in controlling one's desires and emotions. By using reason to guide our actions and decisions, we can avoid unnecessary suffering and achieve inner peace. For Democritus, living according to virtue meant cultivating qualities like self-discipline, wisdom, and justice. He believed that these virtues help individuals navigate the complexities of life and maintain harmony in their relationships with others. Happiness resides not in possessions and not in gold. Happiness dwells in the soul. Democritus' ethical philosophy, with its focus on moderation and rational self-control, had a significant influence on later philosophical schools, particularly Epicureanism and Stoicism, both of which adopted similar views on the pursuit of happiness and the role of reason in ethical conduct. Views on the soul and the afterlife. Democritus believed that the soul was composed of fine, smooth atoms, similar to those of fire. He did not believe in the immortality of the soul, instead arguing that the soul, like the body, dissolves back into atoms after death. This materialist view of the soul rejected the notion of an afterlife or divine judgment, and instead focused on the natural and mechanistic processes governing life and death. Works and fragments. Democritus is believed to have written many works on a wide range of subjects, including physics, ethics, mathematics, music, and aesthetics. However, like most pre-Socratic philosophers, his writings have not survived in their entirety, and only fragments remain. Influence and legacy. Democritus' atomic theory laid the foundation for materialism and had a profound impact on later philosophy and science. His ideas significantly influenced the Epicureans, particularly Epicurus, who adopted and expanded Democritus' atomic theory into a full, ethical and metaphysical system. The Stoics and skeptics also engaged with his ideas, often in opposition, but still acknowledging the importance of his contributions to philosophy. During the Renaissance, Democritus' atomism was revived by thinkers such as Pierre Gassendi and Isaac Newton, whose work on mechanical philosophy and physics reflected some of Democritus' ideas about the nature of matter and motion. John Dalton's atomic theory in the early 19th century can also be seen as a direct descendant of Democritus and Leucippus' ancient theories, marking their influence on modern atomic science. His ethical teachings, emphasizing the pursuit of happiness through inner peace and moderation, also resonated with later ethical systems, especially Epicureanism and Stoicism, which sought tranquility through understanding the natural world and living in harmony with reason. Conclusion. Democritus stands as one of the most important figures in ancient Greek philosophy, particularly for his development of atomism and his materialistic worldview. His theory that everything in the universe consists of indivisible particles moving through a void was groundbreaking and paved the way for modern scientific thought, especially in physics and chemistry. Additionally, his ethical teachings, emphasizing the importance of moderation, self-control, and inner happiness, left a lasting legacy in both philosophy and practical ethics. Although much of his work is lost, Democritus' ideas continued to shape the course of Western thought for centuries, influencing philosophers, scientists, and ethicists alike. His approach to understanding reality through natural causes and logical reasoning, without reliance on supernatural explanations, marked a significant shift in intellectual history, contributing to the development of both philosophy and science as we know them today. Summary. Pre-Socratic philosophers, also known as the early Greek philosophers, lived before the time of Socrates, 469,399 BCE, and are often considered the first philosophers in the Western tradition. These thinkers were primarily concerned with understanding the natural world, the origins of the cosmos, and the nature of reality. They moved away from mythological explanations and sought rational, logical reasons for the world's functioning. Below are Pre-Socratic philosophers. 1. Thales c. 624 to 546 BCE. Thales is often regarded as the first philosopher in the Western tradition. He proposed that water is the fundamental substance, or arch that constitutes all things. He is also known for his contributions to geometry and astronomy. 2. Anaximander c. 610 to 546 BCE. A pupil of Thales, Anaximander believed that the arch was not a specific element like water, but rather the apeiron, or the infinite or boundless. He was one of the first to suggest that humans evolved from earlier life forms. 3. Anaximenes c. 585 to 525 BCE. A student of Anaximander, Anaximenes believed that air was the fundamental substance from which everything else originates. He thought that changes in the density of air accounted for the variety of things in the world. 4. Pythagoras 570 to 495 BCE. Pythagoras is best known for his contributions to mathematics, particularly the Pythagorean theorem. Philosophically, he believed that numbers and mathematical relationships were the ultimate reality. He also founded a religious and philosophical community that followed strict rules of behavior. 5. Heraclitus c. 535 to 475 BCE. Known for his doctrine that everything flows Pantarei, Heraclitus believed that change is the fundamental essence of the universe. He also introduced the concept of the logos, a rational principle governing the cosmos. 6. Parmenides c. 515 to 450 BCE. Parmenides argued that change and multiplicity were illusions, and that true reality is unchanging and one. He is considered one of the founders of metaphysics, and had a significant influence on later philosophers like Plato. 7. Empedocles c. 490 to 430 BCE. Empedocles proposed that everything in the universe is composed of four roots: earth, air, fire, and water. These elements are mixed and separated by the forces of love and strife. 8. Anaxagoras c. 500 c. 428 BCE. Anaxagoras introduced the concept of nous, mind, as the ordering principle of the cosmos. He also suggested that the sun was a fiery mass and not a god, a radical view for his time. 9. Leucippus c. 5th century BCE. Leucippus is credited with founding the atomic theory, later developed by Democritus. He posited that the universe is made up of small, indivisible particles, atoms and empty space. 10. Democritus c. 460 to 370 BCE. A student of Leucippus, Democritus expanded atomic theory by suggesting that all matter consists of atoms in constant motion. His views foreshadowed modern scientific concepts of matter. These philosophers laid the groundwork for the intellectual developments of later figures, such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Their inquiries into the nature of reality, existence, and the cosmos marked the beginning of Western philosophy. The influence of Pre-Socratic philosophers on modern thought. The Pre-Socratic philosophers continue to have a significant influence and meaning for modern thought, particularly in the realms of philosophy, science, ethics, and critical thinking. Although these thinkers lived over 2 millennia ago, their ideas laid the foundation for many intellectual traditions and ways of thinking that are still relevant in the modern world. Here's how their influence extends to present times. 1. Foundation of scientific thinking. The Pre-Socratics were among the first thinkers to question myths and supernatural explanations of the universe, and they sought natural and rational explanations for phenomena. They introduced the idea that the universe could be understood through observation, logic, and reason, principles that are fundamental to the scientific method today. Thales c. 624 to 546 BCE is often regarded as the first scientist for his attempts to explain natural phenomena, such as the origin of the cosmos, through naturalistic rather than mythological means. Anaximander proposed that life might have evolved from simpler forms, which prefigures evolutionary theory. Leucippus and Democritus developed atomic theory, which, although differing from modern atomic theory, laid the groundwork for understanding matter in terms of particles and mechanisms, rather than mystical forces. Modern physics, cosmology, and biology still build on these foundational ideas. For example, the atomism of Leucippus and Democritus can be seen as a precursor to modern atomic and particle physics. The pre-Socratic emphasis on natural causes influences today's reliance on empirical evidence and causal reasoning in science. 2. Philosophical inquiry and metaphysics. Pre-Socratic philosophers laid the foundation for metaphysics, the branch of philosophy that deals with the nature of reality, existence, and the universe. Their inquiries into the nature of being and change are still central to philosophical discussions today. Parmenides introduced the idea that being is eternal and unchanging, which led to discussions about the nature of reality versus appearance. His challenge that change is an illusion remains a profound question in modern philosophy. Heraclitus argued that everything is in flux and emphasized the importance of change and becoming, which resonates with contemporary discussions in process philosophy and existentialists. Ontology, the study of being, and epistemology, the study of knowledge, in modern philosophy continue to grapple with questions originally raised by pre-Socratic thinkers. 3. Rationality and critical thinking. The pre-Socratics set a precedent for using reason, logic, and argument to understand the world. This tradition of rational inquiry influences modern approaches to problem-solving and critical thinking. Xenophanes was one of the first philosophers to criticize traditional religious beliefs, introducing the idea that our understanding of the divine or the cosmos should be subject to rational scrutiny. This approach influenced the development of secular thought and skepticism. Empedocles introduced the idea of causal forces, love and strife, acting on elements to bring about change, showing an early attempt to think about systems and interactions that shape the world. This kind of reasoning is echoed in modern systems theory and scientific explanations of causality. Modern education emphasizes critical thinking, logic, and reasoning as essential skills, many of which were pioneered by these early philosophers. 4. Ethical reflections. Though not as prominently known for ethics as later philosophers like Socrates, the pre-Socratics laid early groundwork for ethical thinking. By exploring the nature of the cosmos and humanity's place within it, they began questioning the relationship between human behavior, natural laws, and the universe. Democritus wrote extensively on happiness, proposing that inner tranquility and self-control lead to the good life. His view that happiness depends on inner peace rather than external possessions is echoed in modern self-help and psychological approaches to well-being. The Pythagoreans, including Pythagoras, emphasized harmony and balance, which became key ideas in the development of ethics and aesthetics. They believed that living a life in accordance with cosmic order led to personal and moral virtue, a notion that resonates with modern ideas about living in harmony with nature and the environment. Modern ethical theories often involve questions about human nature, free will, and the good life, all of which have their roots in pre-Socratic thought. 5. Influence on modern science and cosmology. Pre-Socratic ideas about the structure of the cosmos influenced later developments in astronomy and physics. Their efforts to explain natural phenomena without invoking divine causes were a critical step toward the development of modern science. Anaxagoras proposed that the sun is a fiery mass and the moon reflects its light, which laid the groundwork for later astronomical theories. Pythagoras introduced the idea that the universe operates according to mathematical laws, an idea that directly influenced modern physics and astronomy. The search for unifying principles in nature, whether in quantum mechanics, cosmology, or theories of everything, echoes the early attempts of pre-Socratic thinkers to find a single, fundamental principle arch behind the cosmos. 6. Environmental and ecological thinking. The pre-Socratics' exploration of the elements earth, air, fire, water represents an early attempt to understand natural forces. Modern environmental science and ecology can trace their intellectual roots to these early reflections on how nature is composed and structured. Empedocles' four-element theory, while outdated in its specifics, was an early attempt to categorize and analyze the components of the natural world, foreshadowing modern environmental thinking about ecosystems and the balance of forces in nature. The focus on natural cycles and the interaction of forces in nature has parallels with today's concern for the environment, climate change, and understanding the Earth as a complex system. 7. Philosophy of mind and consciousness. Pre-Socratic philosophers also laid the foundation for philosophy of mind and discussions about consciousness. Anaxagoras introduced the concept of nous-mind as the organizing principle of the universe, which has had a lasting impact on later metaphysical discussions of intelligence, consciousness, and the nature of the mind. Today, the study of cognitive science and consciousness continues to explore questions of how intelligence and mind relate to physical reality. 8. Scientific and philosophical skepticism. The pre-Socratics' willingness to challenge prevailing religious and mythological views of the world created a tradition of skepticism and critical inquiry that persists in modern philosophy and science. Xenophanes questioned the anthropomorphic views of gods and introduced the idea that human understanding of the divine is limited and shaped by cultural biases. This form of philosophical skepticism laid the groundwork for later questioning of religious authority and the development of secular and humanist thought. 9. Relevance in the modern thought. It is concluded that the pre-Socratic philosophers are not just historical curiosities, but foundational figures whose ideas continue to influence modern thought. Their commitment to reason, naturalistic explanations, and the use of logic and evidence laid the groundwork for both Western philosophy and modern science. The questions they raised about the nature of reality, change, and human existence remain relevant to our understanding of the world today. In a world increasingly dependent on scientific inquiry, critical thinking, and ethical reflection, the intellectual legacy of the pre-Socratic thinkers provides valuable insights into how we understand nature, the cosmos, and our place within it. The end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel.